I'm now in the stage of cleaning up my molds. You can see I've got them sort of scattered all over the garage. And I'm starting to do the little repairs on them to make sure that I get a good panel out of them. So taking a little closer, for example on this one, at first glance it looks really good. And in general I'm finding three sorts of errors. One is just some trimming around the edges, as you would expect. Two is there's a few places, like right in here, where you can see where I had a void. Even though I did fillet the edges, the fillet didn't get all the way into the corner here. So I'm gonna have to rebuild that and bring it out so I have a nice crisp corner around the edge of this. Actually got another one right there. These are probably the two worst ones I have in all the molds. The other one is, gosh, this looks pretty good as you look at it. But once you put a light across it, you can see it's a different story. You can see all these voids in here. And this is one of the worst panels that I'm showing you. And this is the thing that I was trying to avoid, where you have, once you put down your gel coat and then put fiberglass over it, it tends to sort of bunch up like this. It sort of, as the fiberglass on top of it dries, it shrinks, and it sort of bunches up, and it basically grabs the gel coat and makes all these wrinkles and sort of pulls it away and creates these voids. And that is particularly on this one, since I put on 4 layers of 1.5 inch chopped strand mat, and it takes a lot of resin to make that happen. And that's the resin that shrinks. So it caused this. I think if I had to do it again, and then put on like 1 layer of 6-ounce fiberglass cloth, and let that cure and harden, and that'll give you a nice hard substrate before you start layering on all those layers of chopped strand mat with all that resin that's going to shrink. So on to the repairs. It's time to make the mount for this rear hatch. And you can see I've cut a hole in my plug here, and as you look down inside, you can see the structure down here. And what I need to do is build a mount that rests on this but supports the body. But it's a very sort of complex shape, trying to make, like a metal bracket out of it. So what I've decided to do is make it out of fiberglass. And how do you get that mold right? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some pour foam, some 2-part pour foam, in a plastic bag, and mix it up in the bag, and then shove it down in here and let it take the shape of both that red bracket and of the body. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is I've got some Gorilla Tape on here, 2 strips of Gorilla Tape, and that's because when this foam expands, it actually has quite a bit of force, and I don't want this thing blowing out. So that's on there for extra support. And then over here you can see I am ready to pour. I've got my part A and part B. I've got it measured out into equal amounts. I'm going to shove it into this Ziploc bag and then watch it expand. And by the way, I've practiced a couple of times stuffing that bag in here, so I'll be able to do it quickly and then hold that foam down so it presses right down and takes the shape of what we've got inside there. And the fact that it's in a plastic bag means when I pull this all apart, that that plastic bag keeps it from sticking to the body, and I'll be able to go ahead and pull it out and finish it off and make a fiberglass mold of it.
Mixing it up. Make sure it's good mix. There we go. Good mixed. You can feel it start to get warm, and then in it goes. Actually, it looks like I had a hole in it. I got stuff way down in there. Just waiting for the reaction. And I purposely put more in than I think I'll need, And here it goes. I think I'm going to make a big old mess. Again, just kind of holding it, try to force it down in there. Oh, I can hear it squirting out. I had a hole in the bag. I didn't realize. Of course, I've got all my safety equipment on here. It does let out noxious fumes. And this is nasty stuff to get on your hands. But yeah, it seems to be filling that cavity really well. I can hear it squishing out the hole that I didn't see. Look for holes the next time. Still expanding. I can hear it squirting. Getting nice and warm. Still expanding. Don't come back now. This way. Hold it. Get right warm. Still expanding. There's a place left here. I'll make it plain. That's it. Okay, look hard. It's already firm. Still warm? It's not going up. And there it is. It's still hard. Actually, I sliced it pretty well. But look how it's plain. Look at the mess. And I sliced a couple bits here. I'll put it all single there. And there it is. It's not expanding. And it's right now.
I've cut the tail off now. This is the section that was in there before. I'll pull that off. You can see I've got a pretty good mold. I'm going to throw away all of this part. It's this part. You can see I got a good indentation of the panel. And when you pull this out, that is the metal piece that I wanted to mount to. And on the underside, you can see, if I grab a hold of it here, that I've got a good impression of it. So that's going to make a great mount. I spent about 10 minutes cutting with my hack knife and shaping with these two rasps to cut down the rear nacelle mount. You can see all the pieces that have come off, and you end up with this. And you can see how it will fit. There's the metal part, and then this is the part that will be glued to the inside of the shell. A perfect fit. Now that I've got my molds finished, you might wonder why I'm keeping the plug around. Well, there's still some more things I can do with it. For example, right now it's all being held in place with the foam and the structure that's underneath it to keep it all aligned and where it's supposed to be. But once I make those final panels, they're going to be hollow and they're going to be very awkward to hang in mid-space and still get everything aligned. So I am working on some preliminary and some temporary mounts for the body. So once I have the final panels, I can clamp them in place and then fabricate the other panel supports. I have welded in with just some little spot welds, a temporary piece of metal that you can clamp on, and that locates the top. So between the top and the back, that will land the rear nacelle there, and then I can fabricate the other mounts. On the front section, the back is just naturally lined up with the back, so that'll fall right in place. So I just had to do something in front. So down underneath here, you'll see that I've basically just welded in, again, a temporary mount, just spot welded in to hold it in place. So once I get those final panels, I'll have a front mount and a back mount. They'll just lay in place and I can do the other mounts. Then you'll also see some other problems here. Well, not problems, but it sure is, it's looking a little ratty right now. You can see I cut out more or less the entire front. I had to make an adjustment to the steering column. So I basically had to cut out all of this space just to get into there, and so I could make that, just to make sure everything lines up with the column and the body and everything is nice and square. The other thing I did was I didn't have a dash before. So I cut out the dash, that part of the cowl, in such a way that it pops right out, and then I can work on it over here on the bench and slip it back and forth, and that is a lot easier way to work on the dash. More on that later once I get the molds ready for that, but that is coming right along. Going around, you'll see also I've pulled out the filler that was in there, the fuel filler. And you can see all the seams where the mold came off, and there's places where the panels cracked as part of the unmold process in several areas. You can see it's all chipped up here. I put a hole over here trying to figure out how to do a mount. I got that figured out. And basically, I'd rather cut the holes in the plug than the final body panels. So I think I have gotten my money's worth out of this. It's time for Destructo. So as I deconstruct my plug, I'm pulling off the skin and then chunks of fiberglass, and you can see all the different layers in here. The pour foam, all the pink foam, and all the plaster. Now I live in North Carolina. It's very, very humid here, and one of the interesting things is as I'm tearing it apart, it was really starting to go because it literally bled. I cut into it and fluid came out. And that's because I'm here in North Carolina and the humidity is very high here. And so all this plaster tends to absorb the moisture, but once the moisture's in there, it's so locked in that it can't get back out. So it just keeps absorbing it until a lot of this plaster, like up in this area, I mean, it's going right back to the liquid state. So that's something to think about if you're in a humid climate, and it's probably been 6 months or so since I put that plaster layer on. You will get some moisture up in there. Okay, I've got this fiberglass and plaster skin peeled off, and I'm down into the layer of pink foam. If you remember, there was a plywood armature in here, and way back, that pink foam started to pull away from the armature, so I put a bunch of great stuff foam in there to kind of glue it all back together. When you look at this, you can see there's some of it right there that I used to glue, and then down in there you can really see how much it filled in the gap and held it together long enough to do the mold. And there's the wooden armature that I attached to the steel chassis. It's still in pretty good condition. Still held together with the safety wires where I stitched it all together. And back down to the base layer that's still wrapped in plastic to keep it clean.